Hello everyone, my name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the podcast all about Joshi Pro Wrestling here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. Every other Monday, we are with you talking about the biggest news in Joshi, along with show reviews, previews, and much, much more.
So if you're new to Joshi or you've been a longtime fan, this is the show for you. We've got something for everyone here. So check us out, Jumping Bomb Audio.
Hello there, everybody. It's me, Garrett Kidney, the co-host of You've Got to Be Kidding Me on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
And I am Liam Jones, my full name, and I'm also a part of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network as a co-host for You've Got to Be Kidding Me.
We are a TNA history podcast that covers TNA 1 month at a time. We cover all the drama, all the matches, all the Vince Russo nonsense you could ever want in your life.
Have you heard of TNA? I bet you have, but would it be funnier if two people made jokes over it the whole time? Probably.
So if that sounds like fun to you, check it out on this very Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network, and Liam will do bits and whatnot.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to another episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Hungee here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. I'm your host, Tyler Fornes, and with me today is not Fred Moreland. Fred is out doing things for his shoot job, and instead we have Voices of Wrestling's ROH expert, Sean Sedor. Sean, how are you today?
Tyler, I'm doing pretty good. A lot going on in life, both in terms of like shoot work stuff and my fandoms outside of that. Last weekend was a pretty big weekend with Penn State losing a close one to Ohio State. Then the Eagles, my Eagles, winning a big game on Sunday night. And then the NASCAR season's almost over. It's a lot going on because the year is almost coming to an end here.
How does the NASCAR season look right now, Sean? Who are the big names that you think have a realistic chance to win the NASCAR title?
So this coming weekend, they're in Martinsville, and that's the final race that essentially decides who gets into who will be fighting for the championship at Phoenix. Right now, Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell have locked themselves in. They won the last two races, so they're in. Last weekend, they were racing in Homestead, Miami, and it was actually probably the most chaotic race in terms of how the standings were playing out, because there were a couple drivers who were on opposite sides. And for those who don't know, the NASCAR playoff system, how it works is basically, they start with 16 drivers at the 10 race to go mark, and then every 3 races they knock 4 out based on the points, and then it comes down to the final 4 of the final race. And there were a couple drivers who were both on the plus and negative side who completely flipped ends after that race. It was pretty nutty. But so Martinsville is this weekend. It's the 1-year anniversary of, and I'm sure people might remember this clip that happened last year. It was the anniversary of where a guy named Ross Chastain, who was trying to get into the Final Four, he basically did what's been called a video game move, and he gassed it up and rode the wall all the way around the final turn there to get in. Though can't do that this year because they've outlawed it. But no, it's exciting. It's really wide open. I can't really give you a favorite of who I think is going to win, especially now with how that whole format works. It always comes down to basically who does the best in the final race. So there are guys who are below the cut line who could feasibly win this weekend and get themselves in. But no, I'm looking forward to it. It's wild. NASCAR is the longest season in sports. It starts in like February and goes all the way to November. So always something going on a NASCAR weekend. But it's exciting. It's exciting and sad knowing that there's 2 races left. But again, like I said, it's a very short off season, so it won't be too long before February rolls around and they're back at it again.
Now, take it from me, the NFL season for me basically goes end of July till end of April. And then I essentially get about 2.5 months off from my shoot job where I don't really have time off per se, but
Right.
it's a heck of a lot more enjoyable to be able to, I got my couple things in. Now I can just go hang out for the rest of the day and enjoy it. I think like it goes way faster than you think. Because we have you on, I want your take on this, Sean. And we thought that it was a mistake at first that when they announced Final Battle being on December 15th in, I believe, Houston, because they're going to have Collision in Houston the next night.
I think it's actually it's the Curtis Colwell Center, which I think is sort of in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's a building. It's weird. So that building is apparently actually like a high school gym, which is weird, but it's also like Texas. So I from what I've heard, like high schools in Texas have like a lot of kids. So I guess like a 5,000 seat gymnasium isn't totally surprising, but yeah, apparently that's like it's a high school gym somewhere in the greater Dallas area. I want to say not in Dallas itself, but somewhere surrounding it. I only know that because AEW's, I think they ran their first show there, or the first time they ran there was in like 2019.
Yep.
So like they've been running that venue a lot, pretty much every year. So, but yeah, no. So obviously, like you were mentioning there, they're doing the pay-per-view exclusively on Honor Club, which is an interesting move. All the pay-per-views they did last year for Ring of Honor and the pay-per-views they've done so far this year they've been available on Honor Club, but also on pay-per-view and Bleacher Report and all that. And they've done, I guess, for 2022, 2023 ROH standards, they've done okay on pay-per-view. But this move, I think, is clearly a sign that they're trying to get more people to either, return to Honor Club or keep their subscriptions. I really don't see any other reason why they would make the pay-per-view exclusively on Honor Club. And we'll see what happens with it. I mean, I haven't checked this, but I'm pretty sure the way it's going to work out is that it's just going to be, it's not like UFC where you subscribe to ESPN Plus and then you have to buy the pay-per-view on top of it. I think, as far as I know, it's just going to be you purchase your Honor Club subscription and then you get access to the pay-per-view, which I think that's worth giving it a shot to see how it goes and see how it impacts the Honor Club subscriptions. Also, probably a smart move given the fact that they're also running an AEW pay-per-view, as we'll talk about a little bit later at the end of December. So maybe part of the idea too is that, hey, we don't want people to pay. We already had them pay for 2 pay-per-views within a week of each other back in August, September, but those were both AEW. So maybe the thought is, we'll just put this on Honor Club, see how it does, and then it will sort of mitigate costs for people when they purchase the new December pay-per-view that we'll talk about.
You'll know this answer, Sean. Before the pandemic, didn't Honor Club subscribers get like half off of Ring of Honor pay-per-views?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. I'm fairly certain that was the case for a while there. I know they were doing a thing pre-pandemic where they had the pay-per-views, but then for like the normal, I guess what I would still consider the like DVD live events, there was a point where they started to stream those on Honor Club totally like live, totally for free for those who already have the subscription. So like I said, I think that's how this pay-per-view is going to work out as far as I know. But yeah, I think previously Honor Club members got a discount on the pay-per-view, and there were different tiers. I know I wrote a couple articles for Voices of Wrestling on it at the time, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that was sort of how it worked at the time.
So there's this theory that's going around, and it's very intriguing that Tony Khan is almost throwing things at a wall right now, trying to see how things will work as far as pay-per-view structure, because this whole Ring of Honor quote unquote experiment, as you can say, is about 18 months old, and the actual television has only been going on since I think February. So we're still trying to figure out how things are going to be structured. And obviously AEW has a new TV deal. It's about to come. It feels like we've been talking about that for over 6 months, but the 3 pay-per-views in 35 days earlier this month with All In, All Out, and Wrestle Dream. And then now you have Tony Khan putting a pay-per-view exclusively on Honor Club. It feels like he's trying to kind of see what works with the fan base and what doesn't, and making sure he doesn't exhaust the fan base, because it feels like every pay-per-view is going to get about 100,000 buys at least. And then the rest of the buys are going to be determined by a multitude of factors. One of them being the card, another being, hey, do I have money for this? Because I've already bought 2 pay-per-views in the past month, so maybe I shouldn't buy a third. Do you think this is another one of those instances? And do you think there's a realistic chance of all Ring of Honor pay-per-views going strictly to Honor Club and trying to really spike that service for longevity rather than just getting a $40 spike once a quarter?
I think it's going to depend on how well, obviously, this Final Battle show does. And I think what's tricky about doing it now is that it with them doing this pay-per-view exclusively on Honor Club, I feel like it's going to kind of make it hard for them to go back and put Ring of Honor pay-per-views back on traditional pay-per-view, because especially if you get a significant spike in Honor Club subscriptions, I don't know if people, if you do, I'm presuming the next pay-per-view will be the WrestleMania weekend show next year in Philadelphia. I don't know if you can go back and say, we offer this pay-per-view exclusively on Honor Club, but now we're going to offer it on pay-per-view again. I don't know if you can do that it's like the whole WWE issue that they ran into when they launched the WWE Network, where once they started offering their pay-per-views exclusively on the WWE Network, it's like, yeah, they still sell pay-per-view, but you basically price the value of WWE pay-per-views at $9.99. So as far as the numbers go, if it does well, I'm sure they're going to keep doing the shows exclusively on Honor Club. And then, if it doesn't really pop the subscriptions, I'm not sure. I guess maybe they try to go back, and then I guess in theory they could do both. They could go back to offering on pay-per-view and then do the Honor Club thing as well. And then I think a big part of it too is just the card. And obviously, when you look at the champion lineup for Ring of Honor right now, we've got a lot of big stars holding the titles right now, and I'm sure that's playing a big role in them trying to spike this Honor Club number. So you got, Eddie Kingston's going to be on the card because he's obviously the Ring of Honor champion. You got the Hung Bucks, Adam Page and the Young Bucks as the Trios champions. You got MJF as one half of the tag team champions. And then you have also, people like Athena and Shibata, and you got some big names that are all on this poster for Final Battle. So, moving some of these titles onto a lot of mainstream AEW talents, or I guess mainly AEW talents, is, clearly a sign that they're really trying to boost the lineups and get as many subscriptions as possible. Because, if they were trying to get the Honor Club subs up and the talent wasn't an issue, then the Young Bucks and Adam Page wouldn't be holding the Trios titles, for example. So I'm interested to see how it does. I'm interested to see what the lineup looks like, and it should be fascinating to follow what the next step is after Final Battle.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see kind of how things play out. And we do have another AEW pay-per-view that we briefly mentioned earlier in this conversation, and that is World's End. It will take place at the Nassau Coliseum in Long Island, New York, and it will be on Saturday, December 30th. So it's a very interesting time to put a pay-per-view on. And I know historically Final Battle has kind of been I believe it's been towards the latter end of December, but they moved it up to the 15th. And now you have this show, and I'm taking a look here because I can't remember when the college football playoff is, if it's going to go head to head. Because if it goes head to head with the college football playoff, it's going to be very interesting. And it looks like it might. The playoffs semifinals are on the 1st. They're going to be in the next year, so we don't have to worry about that.
Okay, I'm sure it'll go up against some like bowl game or something. Or I know at that point in the year there are NFL games on Saturdays, so it might have to go against some sort of NFL game. I think the most interesting point. Well, first of all, I think the title was funny because as soon as I saw it, for whatever reason I just think of the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie because the name of that movie is At World's End. So that was a little funny thing there. But I guess what's interesting too is that they're running it at not the new arena in Long Island. They're running it at the old arena in Long Island, the Nassau Coliseum, which, I, at least from what I've heard in the Slack, while it's not used for much anymore since the new arena has been built, but apparently, like, it's not the dump that was apparently, like for many years. But still, it's interesting. And I was checking to see, is there like an Islanders game that sort of conflicts? And well, at the new arena, I think there's an Islanders game there the day before, and then a game the day after. But there's nothing there on the 30th. So I don't know if it's just like it's logistically it would have been hard for them to go from a hockey setup to a wrestling setup and then back to a hockey setup within like 2 days. Maybe that was part of the reason why they went with the older arena. But yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how it does from an attendance standpoint. I think a fascinating aspect of it is that it is in the New York City metropolitan area on New Year's weekend. So, it's going to be a very hectic weekend in that area, I'm sure. And like, for example, like, I live in Pennsylvania. New York City's not that far from me. If it was another weekend, I might have considered going to the show. But the fact that it's, New Year's Eve weekend, it's like, that makes it like almost a non-starter for me because I don't want to be in the city for all the hectic New Year's celebrations and whatnot. But I'm wondering how it being New Year's weekend in New York City will affect any potential, maybe I guess out of town travelers who might come in for the show. I'm sure there won't be that many, but I mean more like people, if you're coming from like, Pennsylvania, like me, or New Jersey, or like Connecticut, or Rhode Island, or Massachusetts, or something like that, and you want to come see a pay-per-view, I don't know if, it being New Year's weekend will make it more difficult from like a travel standpoint or like getting hotels or whatever. But no, I'm curious to see how it does. Like you said, there's obviously going to be the sports competition, and it just continues the trend of AEW adding more pay-per-views to the calendar.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it does. And I like your point about using kind of the older building, because the older building itself usually means less money. And one of the reasons why you don't see Madison Square Garden run a lot, well, the Madison Square Garden is ran like 320 days a year because obviously you have the Knicks, you have the Liberty, and you have the Rangers that play there regularly, not to mention all the concerts and shows and performances that go on there, including the occasional AEW, WWE show. Like, theoretically, I don't actually think AEW has ever ran Madison Square Garden, because whenever they go to New York, they usually go Long Island, somewhere in New Jersey, or they go up to Arthur Ashe in Queens. So it's very interesting to see that area is getting another big AEW show. And I think that's the one element that I don't think is going to get talked about enough here, Sean, because they have really exhausted that market out, because they had one of the first collisions in Trenton, and that was right after, I can't remember where they were. I think they might have been up in like by the Meadowlands when they ran Death Before Dishonor.
Yeah,
And then,
so they ran Death Before Dishonor in Trenton, New Jersey.
okay.
And then the Collision the next day was in I forget the name of the arena, but it's where the Devils play. And it was in Newark, New Jersey.
Okay.
And yeah, it was funny because that was actually the first time that I had not gone to an AEW show in Newark. Because all the previous times that they'd gone to Newark, there was, I'd gone to in 2021, I went there because that was originally supposed to be in March 2020, and then obviously got postponed. And I was there for there was the second Hangman Danielson match in early 2022, the first TBS show, and then I was there for Full Gear last year. So I've gone to pretty much every show in that Newark venue, but I had to miss that Collision show because it just didn't work out for me logistically. It was the same weekend NASCAR was in Pocono, so I couldn't make it out there. But yeah,
anytime you can go watch a race in a triangle, I'm with you. And I don't mean that as a meme. I think that track is just fascinating. And ever since I don't watch NASCAR anymore, but when I was younger, I watched it every single weekend, and there was just something about watching it on a triangle racetrack that was just fun to me.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a massive facility, and it's always funny, traveling there because it's about, I want to say it's a little under an hour from my house, so the drive isn't that far. And it's always funny because it's like we're driving through the Pocono Mountains, we're in the middle of the woods, and then all of a sudden you hit the traffic, and then you come out to a clearing, and the track's like just in this clearing in the middle of the woods. But yeah, as far as the New York market thing goes, I know that they mentioned it last night that this technically is their first pay-per-view in the state of New York proper, so that's kind of a interesting wrinkle to it. But yeah, so as far as New York City, obviously they run Arthur Ashe Stadium for a Grand Slam, and then really their other, I guess, New York City area venues that they've been running have been the arena in Newark, and then the new arena they built in Long Island. But again, for this show, they're going to the old arena, the Nassau Coliseum. But well, it should be interesting to see how that card shapes up, and yeah, I'm looking forward to watching a pay-per-view on right after Christmas and right before New Year's.
I think it's going to be a real test to see if they've really exhausted that market or not, because I was at one of the lowest attended AEW pay-per-views, and that was Full Gear 2021. Minnesota had not quite gotten all the way to the point of normalcy with everybody yet. And I think they did 10-8 at Target Center for a wrestling show, you could easily do 14,000. And I'm wondering if they're able to clear it. Now, attendance has gone up the last few weeks, and we've last week's Dynamite and Rampage had Mystico in Houston. It was over 5,000. This week's had Okada, and it was over 5,000. Wonder how much of that has to do with being Mystico and Okada being booked, but it's still a positive sign for Dynamite. And when you talk about going into an potentially overexposed market, how much will it just being a pay-per-view show impact it? And I'm very fascinated to see how ticket sales play out, because it's been very slow initially for AEW shows, including pay-per-views.
Right. I mean, ultimately, I would, as far as the tickets go, I'm far more curious and concerned about the television shows as opposed to the pay-per-views. I mean, honestly, the pay-per-views aren't selling out, certainly, compared to what they were even a year ago. But I think as long as they're announced far enough in advance, I think they'll ultimately get to a number that's, I would say, is solid. I mean, we're almost a month from Full Gear, and it certainly seems like they'll be able to get to 10,000 in the forum there. So, I mean, we'll see. I don't want to, I'm not very good at predicting attendances or anything like that, but I think they could get to a decent number. And again, you are dealing with, New Year's weekend, so that could cause some maybe issues in terms of ticket sales go. But then again, maybe you'll get people who will buy, a ticket as a Christmas gift or something like that, which I'm sure some people will do. But Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that, it's definitely going to 10,000 people or anything like that. But yeah, I'm sure it'll do okay, or at least decent. But yeah, we'll see when the time comes and when tickets go on sale. And yeah, as far as the New York stuff goes, I think it just comes down to you got to. I mean, we saw with Grand Slam that once they promoted the hell out of it in the final week, the tickets went up to a respectable number. But the fact that they had to do such a hard PR push in that last week just to get to a respectable number, that certainly says a lot about what their standing is in the market currently. So hopefully they do some more promotion. Hopefully they get things in gear, and hopefully they do a lot of promoting for the show so that they don't have to, scratch and claw and like go work overtime on the last minute to get the ticket sales up.
Yeah, and I have no problem with them trying to get the tickets up last second. It's mainly the ticket sales leading up to them adding those discounts, because hell, almost everybody adds some form of discount to try and get more people in the building at the very end. But it's just worrisome that they're really ramping it up when they've only sold like 1,600 tickets. So I'm fascinated to kind of see how the ticket buying culture ends up continuing to evolve with this company, because that's going to be really big. But
Right.
We've talked quite a bit about pay-per-views, and we have an interesting one coming up in Full Gear. And these shows, Sean, have been very interesting, and there's been a lot of different dichotomy discussions about them. When you talk about the overall tone of how you feel about AEW as a promotion right now, how do you feel? Because they are giving us a product that is significantly similar, yet significantly different from the product that we, one, grew to love with this company, and two, expect.
Right. So obviously, a lot of the weirdness involving, MJF's storylines and all the stuff with Adam Cole and Roderick Strong and now Tony Storm, it's sort of gotten it's gotten long in the tooth. And I'm someone who's not like, when I sit down and watch wrestling, I watch it, to just have a good time, watch some great wrestling matches and generally good storylines depending on what the promotion is. Obviously, if I'm watching a place like New Japan, there are stories in New Japan, but I'm not saying that I'm not upset or angry about what's some of the changes that I feel like have been for the worse in AEW recently with some of their quote unquote storytelling. But yeah, it's more just they still give us great wrestling, they still give us cool matches, but some of the storyline stuff has left me again. I'm someone who I try not to get very angry at things, particularly when it comes to stuff that I watch for fun. So like when I said I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed, that sort of is pretty accurate. I'm just sort of AEW, you're kind of better than this. All this stuff is very, very WWE-esque and very sort of cringy and corny and over the top to a ridiculous degree. And I just find it funny that people were talking about, or when reports were coming out about the whole Adam Cole MJF thing, that's oh, this is going to be our bloodline or whatever. And it's well, and looking back on it now, it's well, the bloodline storyline, well, it had sort of, I guess, some comedic elements, and that was more, I would say that was just more down to Sami Zayn, because Sami Zayn's just a natural goofball, and that's just who he is. They're not, this whole, brochacho thing, it's not even Bloodline, because the Bloodline didn't even have that much. It's all it's mostly just a comedy storyline, which is sort of what bugs me the most. It's that it's you say, or people in AEW, as it came out months ago, said, oh, this is our Bloodline, but it's not even really Bloodline. It's just a comedy storyline involving your world champion, and it's just doesn't it doesn't fit the tone of the promotion at all. And it's and as we saw last night, it's this really freaking weird dichotomy where one moment you'll have Roderick Strong and the Kingdom out there, they're starting the show doing a promo with MJF, and then MJF, is interacting with them. He kicks Roddy's wheelchair away, and they go running after him. And then MJF turns around and has to do like this serious promo on his match with Juice Robinson, where he's threatening to beat him half to death. And it's like, it's just like the dichotomy and the tonal shift is just super, super weird. And yeah, it's just like, I obviously don't like the whole Brochacho stuff or the Tony Storm stuff, which is interesting to start, but then it's gone so over the top that it's, at the point of just being overly ridiculous. And yeah, it's certainly not what I watch AEW for. I still watch AEW for the good wrestling, for some storylines that work out pretty well. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff right now that's not jiving with me really. So I'm still gonna watch it. Someone like me is not who AEW should be concerned about, because I'm one of those people who's gonna be watching the show no matter what. But there are certainly a lot of people who are not happy with the direction and are being more turned off by AEW based on some of the storylines that they're doing. And like, those are the people you have to worry about. Like, again, someone like me, I'm just gonna watch the show no matter what. But because I'm already pot committed to AEW at this point. But yeah, it's certainly concerning. And again, if the MJF and Cole storyline, it popped quarter hours there for a little bit, but as for example, like the flagship guys, Joe and Rich have mentioned, it's not exactly moving tickets, and what's moving the tickets is the cool matches and bringing in people like Mystico and Okada. So as far as their ticket problem goes, maybe you should consider just booking more cool matches as opposed to as giving us like MGF's like variety hour.
One last question, then I want to start talking about those cool matches because we had a couple of them this weekend. Do you think MJF's a little gotten to with this and the sudden shift from the massive Brochacho stuff to, hey, now all of a sudden I have 5 guys coming after me because I'm the world champ, and now they're hot-shotting a Kenny Omega MJF match, which MJF Kenny Omega is arguably the greatest match that they can make in AEW, only involving AEW wrestlers right now. And it feels like it's being rushed on you can argue it's a 10-day build. It's a 3-day build, in my opinion. Do you think that he's been listening just a little bit too much to the outside noise when it comes to his program and why we've seen such a massive shift?
Well, it certainly seemed like he read the article that Suit Williams did the other
week.
Good.
Suit is smart.
Yes, Suit. That's Suit Williams. He knows a thing or two. But yeah, I mean, I guess the thing that I noticed on, especially they're obviously setting up a lot of different challengers. I mean, they had Kenny Omega being set up, they had Wardlow being set up, they had Samoa Joe being set up, and then all this going on while the Jay White stuff is happening. And it does create something interesting because it gives the idea of, hey, everybody's gunning for the world title. And I know it had been talked about that this whole MJF Cole thing was planned until December, and part of me thinks that it might have been sort of all part of the plan, because you have this idea that now Cole is out, or maybe part of the plan since Cole got injured, and some people are still in doubt about that. But I guess in the current storyline, it works in the sense that MJF is, he's on his own. He doesn't have Cole anymore, and so all these people are trying to be his friends, and he's not really accepting them. And then meanwhile, he's got all these different plot points coming at him from, again, like Wardlow and Joe and Angle. Why did I say Angle? Kenny Omega. I don't know why I said Kurt Angle, why he came to mind. But yeah, he's got all these challengers coming his way. And I do like it in the sense that it is creating more focus on the world champion. But then at the same time, it's like, for example, the whole segment last night where you had it ended, I would think pretty strongly with the whole Kenny Omega coming out to front MJF stuff. But then right before that, you had all like the Acclaim stuff, and in a segment where it felt like just everyone was reciting their catchphrases basically. And yeah, as far as the Kenny Omega MGF goes, I apologize if I'm sounding a little scattershot here, just as far as what I'm saying. But I guess my thought on the Kenny Omega MGF match is that, they're doing it on a 3-day build, obviously. And when they first did the tease last week, I was like, okay, they're doing this tease, and they announced Kenny Omega for this collision, but there's no way they're going to do this match, on 3 days' notice or whatever, because it's a big match you could do on a pay-per-view. And I think the bigger issue with it is not so much that you're doing it on a collision, it's the fact that it seems like they only just realized that MGF was going to break the record, and they wanted to get this Kenny match out of the way. And I feel like you could have subtly, built to the idea that MGF was closing in on the record over a several month period. And if you had done that, at least doing that match on like the day or two before they break the record, even if it's on a television show like Collision, at least at that point, you would have had more built to it than you've had, really. So it just sort of feels like that they forgot about it, and they were just sort of making up for lost time by setting up a quick angle to set up the match. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, it's going to be a cool match, but it's disappointing that it's been done on such short notice, and it's going to be disappointing because the fact that we already know that MJF is wrestling Jay White at Full Gear means that the result is, and predetermined results, or a result that is pretty set in stone. That's not a bad thing necessarily, but in this case, it just sort of just ruins it in the sense that you're probably going to get some weird finish. Like if they just had MGF be Omega clean, like okay, that's fine, but we're probably going to get some interference from Callis and his crew. But yeah, it's going to be a good match, but it's also sort of, they could have saved it, or at the very least, they could have done a better job building to it.
Do you think that Tony Khan would dare do the bait and switch here, where we know WWE has done this time and time again, and the one that always rings in my head is the post-WrestleMania, where it was supposed to be, I think it was Kofi Kingston versus Seth Rollins, title versus title, and then they just didn't do the match after announcing it earlier in the show.
Well, they did do the match, but they had I think they had Sheamus and Cesaro run it and do it like a no contest, and then they set up a tag match. But yeah, the idea that they promised them a champion versus champion match with the titles on the line, and then they didn't give you a finish. Yeah,
because I feel like with this hot shot, because it's eerily reminiscent to Goldberg Hogan, where Goldberg Hogan was the biggest match in WCW you could make. And it's obviously different eras, different scenarios, and television ratings matter a hell of a lot more now than they used to. It feels like if there was a time to do any form of bait and switch, or Kenny Omega gets his ass handed to him by the Don Callis family going into it, that this would be the time, because it's your biggest match. And I'm fine doing it on television, because if you can gain, like, let's say 300,000 more viewers on a Wednesday night or a Saturday night, I think that's a massive win. And it's great for your advertisers. It's great for your television partner. And honestly, it's great for you. And there's merit to doing really, really big matches on TV instead of pay-per-view these days. But how they've gotten here tells me that they might be actually willing to do one bait and switch. And my question here is not just about, do you think they'd be willing to do it, but do you think that they would get buried to oblivion for it? Or because this would be like genuinely like the first time they've ever done a bait and switch, they could get away with it?
Like when you're talking bait and switch, are you talking about like them announcing the match and then not delivering it, or just announcing the match and we get like a run and finish. Because I do think that those are two different things. Like,
No, I'm talking like not doing the match, like where Don Callis gets mega heat by just beating the shit out of Omega and be like, you don't deserve a title match. Takeshita beat you, and then maybe we get like a Takeshita MJF match or completely scrap the whole thing. Like, they've never done anything like that, and it's good that they've never done anything like that. But I'm curious, because if they do something like that, would it be viewed as this huge, massive negative where you're just like baiting the fan base? Or is it something because you've never done it and you do it once that there would be an aura of forgiveness about it and it wouldn't be viewed as such a big deal, but rather like continuing the story of Omega and Don Callis?
I don't think they're going to do that, just because it would be one thing if, AEW was hot right now, and I think they'd have a better shot of getting away with something like that. But I think with the position they're in right now, with them being perceived as cold, and it is true, they are, they're certainly not hot. I don't think something like that would go over well in late 2023 AEW. I think what's probably going to happen is that they're going to have the match, and then we're going to get some sort of screwy finish, whether it's the Don Callis crew coming out and costing Kenny the match, but it's also weird at the same time, because MJF is in that weird spot where he still acts like a heel, but he's also perceived by the crowd as a babyface. So that does add another weird wrinkle into it. I mean, I guess another thing that they could do, if they wanted to do something where they can give you the title match, but work the finish in a way where they can get away with, maybe not even doing interference per se, is they could do a 60-minute draw where, MJF could break the record. He doesn't beat Kenny Omega, and yet the draw means that they can still save the match again for a different time period down the line. Sort of like, we were supposed to get the Danielson Omega rematch at Wembley, but because Danielson was hurt, that didn't happen. But I think that doing a 60-minute draw is an idea that they could do to sort of protect, to just sort of do the match, but then protect it for the future. But then again, I do feel like that the Don Callis family is going to get involved in some way to continue that feud with Kenny. So I think the 60-minute draw would be a more interesting idea. But yeah, I if I had to, gun to my head, if I had to put a bet on it, I'd say that we're just going to get a match, and the Callis crew is going to get involved, and they're going to cost Kenny the win.
Yeah, I think that's the likely route, but I'm very intrigued by potential outs in this match, because this is the biggest match that AEW can make, and it feels wrong of how they've gone about it. Not that they've gone about it, because I think we've all expected it to happen, but MJF and Kenny Omega have literally never interacted until last week.
Right. Yeah, and like I said earlier, if they had done a thing where, and again, this sort of shows how AEW isn't, as far as their booking, isn't necessarily planning ahead for a lot of these things as far ahead as they used to, where they could have had, MJF referencing for months and months. Oh, I'm so-and-so days away from breaking the record. I'm so-and-so days away from breaking the record. And you could show, you could have shown like Kenny, maybe acknowledging it backstage, when he's watching a promo or something. But no, it just, again, like I said, it literally just seems like that they forgot that the record was coming up, and they decided, we got to do this. We got to, rush this match on a couple days' notice to just get it in under the gun. So.
Yeah, let's kind of shift gears here, because one of the things we started talking about this whole Kenny Omega MJF discussion is cool matches, and we had a cool as hell match that sold over 2,000 extra tickets to the Dynamite / Rampage taping in Houston, Texas last week, and that was Mystico versus Rocky Romero in a traditional Lucha Rules match, best 2 out of 3 falls. Sean, what did you think of this? I thought this was phenomenal, and more cool shit like this on television.
Yeah, exactly. This is sort of the thing that I'd like to see more of from AEW that they used to do a lot of, but not as much this year. But yeah, I really enjoyed the match. Certainly seemed like, if they had been wrestling in, say, Arena Mexico, we probably would have gotten a better version of this match. But for what it was, I enjoyed it. Really, it was a really good match. Seeing Mystico in the States again, especially after his not so stellar WWE run, was cool to see. Sort of him getting a little bit of redemption from the whole Sin Cara stuff, and having a unique and fun match with Rocky Romero, who was playing his more heelish character from CMLL, which was awesome to see. And yeah, like, what else is there to say? It was just again, not a match that I would say would like blow your socks off or anything like that, but a lot of fun for a Friday night at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun at that 10 o'clock. There really wasn't a whole lot else on Rampage, but I think we do have to talk about these Eddie Kingston promos. And right after Rampage, he cut an incredible promo on Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal, basically calling Lethal a little slime ball and going completely contradictory to the professional wrestler that he knew back in the Ring of Honor days, where Jay Lethal is a 2-time champion. And then tied into the Memphis Street Fight, where this past Wednesday on Dynamite, it was on Collision.
Yep, it was on Collision, right?
I watched Collision right before Dynamite, so my brain got those. I Mandela affected that one, but it was a fantastic match. But Jay Lethal, Satnam Singh, Sanjay Dutt, they all basically helped beat the living crap out of Kingston. So Kingston lost to Jeff Jarrett. Now Lethal gets a title shot, and he cut another great promo saying that he's sorry that his mom's going to cry, not because he's getting beaten up, because she'll know he deserves it. Eddie Kingston's just, if you had to put somebody in the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame based on promo ability only, I think Eddie Kingston would easily be among the top 5. What he's doing right now is just incredible. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I watched this in particular, the one after the Collision match. I was like, oh, look at this! It's another fantastic Eddie Kingston promo. It's like, and I feel like I've sort of become sort of numb to it in the way, but more just like, oh wow, what a surprise! He's cut another awesome promo, and he's doing a very solid job in getting interest in this upcoming Jay Lethal match. And then, the street fight was a little annoying in the sense it's like, I think it's very WWE in the sense that, it feels like something WWE would do where the babyface doesn't have any friends. And it's like, man, Eddie Kingston's basically like I think was it Lethal, Jeff Jarrett, Sanjay, Karen, Satnam Singh, basically like a 5-on-1 situation, and he's got nobody there to help him. It's just like, and it would be one thing if it's like, he has people come out and help him, but ultimately the heels still win. Like, that's something I'd be totally fine with, but it's more just like, does Eddie Kingston have no friends in the locker room? But no, I mean, the street fight itself had plenty of entertaining spots for sure, and interesting that they've done 2 of these matches, because they did one with Mark Briscoe and Jeff Jarrett a couple months back. So now Jarrett in AEW is now technically undefeated in these Memphis street fights. So that's something interesting they got going on there. And I'm looking forward to the Kingston Lethal match, especially if Lethal takes a more serious approach to it. I think it could be pretty good.
I'm very intrigued to see what a matchup with Eddie Kingston and Jay Lethal in the year 2023 will look like, because Lethal might be the most consistent, boring wrestler of all time at this iteration. But he's never bad. He's just not engaging. And I thought his stuff where he did the House of Truth with Truth Martini, I thought that might have been my favorite Jay Lethal. I mean, right. I know people are going to go to Black Machismo when he did his Randy Savage impersonation for years as their favorite, but the House of Truth stuff was just great. And I want to see Lethal get back to being more of that and less of like Jeff Jarrett's lackey, which I love Jeff Jarrett, and he's fun to watch in today's iteration of AEW because he can just get beaten like a drum and it's just fun. But you can get a lot more out of even like a 40-year-old Jay Lethal than you are. And I think hopefully this could be the catalyst of something new.
The one thing I'll say about Jay Lethal, at least, is that, at least that he is a guy who is still relatively good in the ring and still has some charisma in him. Because when I was listening to you describe Jay Lethal, it's like the most boring wrestler in AEW without question is Scorpio Sky. Like that guy's he is just a total jag.
Well, here's the difference between Jay Lethal and Scorpio Sky. Jay Lethal's still really good in the ring.
Oh yeah.
I won't say the same about Scorpio Sky. Lethal he's not engaging. That's what I mean. He's boring.
Well,
but there's more, and that's why it's frustrating.
And as I say about I don't think, for example, I don't think Scorpio Sky is bad per se. He's just I just think he's like an incredibly boring wrestler. Whereas Jay Lethal, obviously I'm a Ring of Honor fan. He was part of a lot of my Ring of Honor watching for many years, and I it's a little harder to enjoy Jay Lethal now, only because I know that he's got the whole circus on the outside, and they're going to get involved and everything like that. So from that standpoint, it's a little, I'm not looking at the Jay Lethal of 6 or 7 years ago when he was Ring of Honor World Champion and basically not the face of the company, but one of the top guys in the company. But every time he goes out there and is in there with a good wrestler, I can always count on him to have a really good match, and that's been the case. I think more often than not in this AEW run. But again, it all depends on how much the circus on the outside gets involved in his matches. And they've already set up a good story where in the street fight they had Jarrett target Kingston's knee, and obviously both Jarrett and Lethal do the figure four. So I'm sure there will be a big story point in the match whenever they do it.
Yeah, it's Eddie Kingston's on one of the funner runs I've seen in a long time, just because he's just being allowed to be an absolute wrestling dork, and that can just create some of the best storylines, and it's working really well. Is there anything else on these Rampage and Collision shows that really stood out to you? Obviously, we're going to talk about the Bryan Danielson and Andrade match because they kind of built it as a dream match, and it was, but it wasn't. I mean, it's not Blue Panther, but
right,
if you would have told me in the year 2015, you could have gotten La Sombra versus Bryan Danielson, I think everybody would have been like, yes, please. And it happened probably 5 years too late because Andrade is just not quite what he used to be. He's gotten really, really big and bulky. But that match was fantastic nonetheless. I think I went 4.25 plus on it.
Right, yeah. So if you did miss Collision or Rampage, I would say Danielson versus Andrade is definitely worth checking out. It's currently at an 8.02 on Cage Match, which is about 4 stars. I think that's a fair rating for that match. Otherwise, I say that the main event, which had Big Bill and Ricky Starks defending the AEW World Tag Team titles against Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta from the BCC, that was a pretty good match that did end in some interference, as we did have the return of the House of Black in various forms throughout Collision, where Malachi Black attacked Danielson after his match, and then a squash match for FTR ended in a no contest when the rest of the House of Black came back, including Brody King, who has a big giant old cast on his arm and looks to be doing the whole Bob Orton deal with the cast now going forward. And it's interesting. So they at the end of Collision, they clearly set up sort of like a 10-man where it's going to be like the BCC and FTR versus Ricky Starks, Big Bill, and the House of Black at some point. And it's really fascinating because the BCC seems to have its tentacles in a lot of different things right now, because they're still, in a way, they're tangled with Ricky Starks and Big Bill, and they're sort of feuding with Orange Cassidy. and they've also got the House of Black now interjecting themselves into things again. So it's sort of like they've got all sorts of different things going on in all sorts of different directions. But yeah, I would say those were the two best matches on Collision. The street fight was more like spectacle than an actual like good match. They did continue the whole Miro and CJ storyline where CJ was sitting out there watching the Miro Action Andrade match, and Miro won. And then I think on the Battle of the Belts show, CJ approached Andrade, so maybe they're setting up Andrade versus Miro at some point. But yeah, other than that, I thought Collision was a decent show. Obviously, the attendance wasn't great in Memphis. As far as Rampage, I guess really only other thread that was going on from Rampage and Collision was people talking about Sky Blue's gear, where she basically had this basically like the Mystery Machine themed gear. I think you watched Collision, Tyler, so you probably saw it. And I guess it was funny just because it's sort of they're doing this storyline where she's getting darker or more heelish, and yet she comes out in like the brightest colored gear you could possibly imagine. That's like Scooby-Doo themed. So that was kind of a weird gear choice, but other than that. And then do you want to briefly touch on Battle of the Belts? Because I watched and you didn't. So do you want me to just touch on that briefly as well?
Yeah, I did find the Mystery Machine gear of Sky Blue very interesting. She's working like a snarmy heel in the match against I don't even remember some jobber, and it was just hilarious because she was that if you've ever watched Scooby-Doo, she was working like the villain. She was working like the ghost, and she's wearing the hero's colors. It was very odd, but maybe it plays into something. It was likely she just bought it, wanted to wear it, and she's just like, I'm going to wear it. And
yeah. I know there was, I saw there was some discourse of people trying to read into it more. And I think it's just that she had that gear already made. And I would have just said, hey, maybe, we're doing the storyline here. Maybe, wear something or wear different colors that sort of are more totally appropriate for the storyline. But yeah, as far as Battle of the Belts goes, Orange Cassidy retained the international title against John Silver. A fine match, though I thought that their match from Full Gear 2020 was significantly better. Samoa Joe retained the ROH TV title against Tony Nese, so it was basically a squash. It only went like a minute. The one match that I would say is worth checking out from this show is Chris Statlander versus Willow Nightingale for the TBS title. That was a really good match, and while Chris Statlander's title reign got off to a rough start, mainly because she wasn't wrestling opponents that I would say were quality opponents. Basically, ever since the Jade match, her title reign has really picked up. Like, that match was very good. I thought probably one of Jade's best AEW matches. The Britt Baker match that I saw at Penn State at a Collision was really good. The Julia Hart match at Wrestle Dream was really good. And then this match was with Willow was really good as well. And again, I wouldn't call any of them necessarily, great in the sense that I'd be putting them in my notebook, but they're not far off that point. So I definitely think that Chris's title reign has been pretty solid since starting with the Jade match, and then where she beat not the one where she beat Jade to win the title, but the one where Jade came back and they had the match on Rampage. But from that point onward, I think her title reign has been very good, and this Willow match added to that.
Yeah, I might have to go back and find that Willow and Statlander match, because Willow has had quite the rise over the last few months, ever since winning the IWGP Women's World Title in that mini tournament.
The strong title, technically, yeah. It was the
strong, my
bad.
bad.
Yeah, it's weird because Stardom's created, or I guess Stardom / New Japan, it's like they created these two new. Well, I guess the IWGP Women's title is more of a Stardom title, and then this one's more. They're just adding New Japan and Stardom's like adding all these titles. It's hard to keep track of, but yeah, she was obviously supposed to lose that match to Mercedes, but then because of the injury, yeah, she won it. But yeah, I guess the only other note is that they did a post match where Willow was going to shake Chris Statler in his hand, and then Sky Blue came out and tried to, force her not to do it, but then she did it anyway. And obviously, I hope that they're not turning Willow heel. Though I think the one thing that I've noticed, I think maybe some other people have noticed, is that while Sky Blue got sprayed by the mist from Julia Hart on television, and Willow, I guess she got sprayed, but it was like off camera because she was supposed to wrestle Julia Hart in like a collision, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And like they took her off for some reason, and then they did a phantom angle where she got sprayed by the mist. I mean, just based on my interpretation, I guess the storyline that they're telling is that, with Sky Blue wrestle, she has all that makeup on around her eyes, and she got fully sprayed by the mist. And I guess this is where they're going, is that, Willow comes out and she has only like one of the eyes sort of like got the makeup on it from the mist. So I guess where they're going is that Willow, because she didn't get fully sprayed by the mist, that she's still sort of, not fully turning dark like Sky Blue. But the mist stuff is always kind of strange. But at least based on that little makeup detail, I'm guessing that's where they're going. But again, I pray to God that they do not turn Willow heel, because that would be a very bad decision.
Yeah, she's got real NXT Bayley energy, and I know I'm not the only one who said that. It's been kind of floating around the wrestling ecosystem for a while, and she's got this special aura about her, and ruining it would be a really poor decision at this point. Maybe you can turn her heel in a few years, but not right now. Let's talk about this Dynamite show for a minute, and it was very interesting. You had Wardlow cut a promo, Samoa Joe get in MJF's face, wanting another title match, and Omega officially challenged MJF and got in his ear and was like, 3 days, bitch, after MJF said 13 days, bitch, over a week ago. And I thought that was really interesting. But the best part of the show was almost certainly the main event tag match with Orange Cassidy and Kazuchika Okada against Claudio Castagnoli and Bryan Danielson. And this is more of what we need to see in AEW. Just great matches and a bunch of dudes who don't normally wrestle against each other, and they just go and have a good match.
Right, exactly. And, when I saw that, because they made the announcement on actually the Battle of the Belts show where Orange Cassidy announced the match, and, as soon as they announced that, I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. And I knew that it was going to move tickets, and it did move tickets for the show in Philadelphia. And it was a pretty great main event, not a match of the year contender or anything like that, but a really strong main event. Certainly, I would say the best thing on the show. And it was pretty cool seeing Okada doing the Rainmaker pose and then the zoom out. And then right after that, Orange Cassidy comes in for the hook and they do the zoom out again. That was a cool moment there. But and then you had some really incredible interactions between Orange Cassidy and Claudio, which were, pretty incredible to see. Where I think at one point Orange escaped out of the giant swing and then went to do his orange punch, but then Claudio caught him in the giant swing. That was definitely a highlight of the match, and it sets up a international title match for next week on Dynamite, which should be incredible. I mean, those guys have been familiar with each other for a while. Obviously, Claudio was in WWE for a long time, but they did wrestle each other in Chikara, back when Orange Cassidy was obviously, no secret at this point anymore. He was Fire Ant, part of the Colony, and I'm sure they had plenty of interactions in Chikara. And it's actually funny because obviously Orange Cassidy was in Chikara, a big character as part of the Colony, and Claudio also in Chikara. He was a mainstay there for many years, and Claudio was teaming with Bryan Danielson, who he, obviously they're BCC stablemates, but they also teamed together in Chikara before, and they were even part of the, I think I'm trying to remember, it was the 2009 King of Trios tournament, I want to say, where it was Bryan, Claudio, and then they were teaming with Dave Taylor in that tournament. So obviously those guys, Chikara connected in some way, mainly through Ring of Honor, but they were partners in Chikara. And then Okada, who, believe it or not, did spend some time in Chikara back in the 2000s. So a bit of a, a bunch of Chikara alumni in this one. But yeah, it was a great main event. Obviously had a very weird finish too, where not weird with, Claudio got the win to set up the title match, but where they were sort of selling a Danielson injury, which I guess the story that they're telling is that, technically with, even though Bryan didn't pin Okada, it was Claudio pinning Orange. Technically, Bryan is 2-0 against Okada, if you want to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the story they're going with is that every time Bryan wrestles Okada hurts him. It seems like that's what they're doing, because I saw the ending last night, and I was like, I didn't see what had happened, and I watched back, and it was just like, oh, Okada just hit him with the Rainmaker, and then Bryan started like selling the side of his face. So, yeah, I guess that's the story they're going with, is that Bryan gets hurt every time he wrestles Okada.
Yeah, I'm not as the worst of your choice of words here. I like that idea.
Which, by the way, that does feel like a very Bryan Danielson idea to do. I'll just say that. It definitely seems like something he came up with.
And I'll give credit to Andrew Rich, host of Music of the Mat, and he mentioned that he thought it might be an ode to him getting a detached retina 15 years ago.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Playing that off, the Orange Punch and the Rainmaker back to back, you could, especially with the height difference between Danielson and Okada, you could easily make the argument that, the arm just got a little too high, hit him right in the eye, and bada bing, bada boom. The best part of AEW television this week, far and away, was the Rainmaker pose and Orange Cassidy hug, because you could tell that Okada was not ready for it, but then he's like, wait, what? And he's like, oh yeah, right. Best friends. Like it was just perfect. And Orange Cassidy thinking that he was just going for the hug it's the little things that make wrestling so enjoyable. And that was just so beautifully done.
Yeah. And again, more cool matches, please. The AEW we like is the one that does a lot of cool matches. So just give us more of that and we'll be happy.
Yes, please. More cool matches. And we do have the one cool match that we talked extensively about already, which is MJF versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Title this Saturday on Collision. And it's going to be interesting because they're going up against, college football. They're hot-shotting a really big match. They've been floating around 500,000 viewers without the presence of a WWE Premium Live event. And I'm curious to see if they'll be able to approach 600,000 or 700,000 with such a big match. And it's also Halloween weekend, which means a lot of young people in that 18 to 29 demographic are going to be going out to Halloween parties, going out to bars, and celebrating in full costume. So I'm very curious to see what this match does in the ratings, because it could do a lot of different things here.
Right. And also, I don't know if you mentioned this too, but it's also got the World Series going on. I think it's game 2, but it's also, I don't know if the Rangers and the Diamondbacks would be considered a marquee matchup for a World Series. So, obviously,
it's definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to watch it because it's the World Series, but, it's certainly not as big compared to if it was had it been the rematch of last year with Houston and Philly. But
casual fans will tune out far quicker. And I know casual fan is kind of a monolith in theory, but when you don't have a major market, and in baseball, Texas is not a major market. You don't have the Dodgers, you don't have the Yankees, you don't have the Red Sox, you don't have the Cubs. Those are your major market baseball teams. That you can include the Braves in there too, because their presence on TBS for the better part of 3 decades was such a massive influence nationally. It's just hard to see a path where this World Series does really, really good ratings.
Right. Yeah. And again, like I said, I'm sure it'll have some effect, but how much of an effect it'll have, to be determined. So we'll see how things go on Saturday.
I'm really intrigued about it. And Sean, I think that's it for the show today. I just want to say thank you very much for coming on and joining me, kind of giving your perspective on the broad scope of AEW and kind of where things are headed. Let's get some plugs in for you. Where can the people follow you, and what do you have going on?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at SASedor2994. I'll put out my wrestling takes and my race hate takes and all of that sort of stuff on there. If you are interested in my work, obviously you can check out the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Well, not the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Well, I'm talking to you right now on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network, but on the website itself, we did talk about Ring of Honor briefly. I'm sure I'll be part of the review for that Final Battle show when it comes around in December. I'm sure I'll be on the review of Full Gear. When I went, or I guess when Wrestle Dream happened back a couple weeks ago, I decided to go see that in the theater.
Nice.
So I went to my local Cinemark, which it's weird because for the longest time our closest like major movie theater was in Cinemark, which for us it's about a 20-ish minute drive away. We have a closer theater now, but it's a little smaller. But as far as AEW goes, like that was the closest option for me to watch the pay-per-view, so I went to do that. That was pretty cool. But I know we were scrambling for people to work the pay-per-view review for the site, so I think I'll probably hop back on that for Full Gear. Other podcasting stuff, myself and Griffin host a drafting podcast called The Draft. You can find that on Twitter at Draft and Wrestlers. That's Draft, the letter N, Wrestlers. We just did an episode with Rich Craich from the Flagship and Lee Malone, another VOW contributor and another part of the podcasting network through the WCW Thunder Pod, Days of Thunder. And we did a draft on 1998 U.S. wrestling. So we basically took pretty much anyone who had worked a notable amount of matches from WWF, WCW, and ECW from 1998, and we did a draft. On the Twitter page for that podcast, again, it's Draft and Wrestlers. We have a link for the episode. I believe we're also on Spotify, and we have the poll where you can go vote for the cards. And then I guess the only other thing wrestling related that I will plug is that I'm someone, speaking of WCW, I'm someone who enjoys playing some Extreme Warfare Revenge. And there's a website called BeTheBooker.net, which is a place that has a lot of different like downloads for different like wrestling sims, aside from like EWR, or including like EWR, TWE, and all that sort of, or TEW, I should say. Man, I can't talk today. EWR, TEW, all that sort of thing, all sorts of other wrestling simulators. You can get like downloads and links for that, but they also have a forum. And on that forum, I post basically just recaps of the WCW game I'm playing right now. So if you're curious, if you just go to the forum, and I'm just double checking it now, the page is called, or if you look up the thread, it's called An Alternate History of WCW, 1998 and Beyond. And currently right now, in my forum diary thread, I'm in like March of 2002. And the game itself, I'm in like July 2002. And I'm just trying to play more of the game just so I could get more further ahead, so that when I post stuff, I'm not posting it at the same time while I'm doing the game. But yeah, it's been a fun journey. It's sort of a thing where I'm like, I play it for a while and I take a break. Play it for a while, take a break, which I feel like happens with all sorts of games that people play. But yeah, if you're into EWR stuff or any like booking sim related stuff, I have that on there, and you can see how I'm doing and everything like that. So yeah, a lot of plugs, but there you go.
Well, Sean, thank you very much. And I will say I listened to the last episode of the draft, and I thought it was a lot of fun, especially how Griffin booked his card. Getting sniped for a Dick Togo right away was hilarious to me. But yeah, thank you very much. And we will be back next week with another special guest, as Fred is ditching me for 2 weeks because he hates me, I guess. So, he's just busy with his shoot job. Like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget, if you are on Google Podcasts, everything transitioned over to YouTube, and we are very easy to find. Go to the Voice of Wrestling YouTube page, and we are right there, ready to rock and roll. Thank you very much, and take it easy.
Hola, my name is Ricardo. I am the host of the Lucha Jovers podcast here in the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. We are a Spanish-speaking show dedicated to discussing and analyzing pro wrestling from all across the world. From AEW to CMLL, we talk about American wrestling, Japanese wrestling, and of course, Lucha Libre. If something big happened in the pro wrestling world, we will talk about it. So if you know Spanish or have a friend that knows Spanish or want to practice your Lucha Libre pronunciations, go listen to the Lucha Jovers podcast right here in the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. Nos vemos por ahí.
Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.